Welcome back to The Line. The federal government has seized $10 million in gaming revenue collected by the Pueblo of Pewaukee. That money is what would have been paid to the state during a period of time when the Pueblo was operating gaming without a signed compact in place. Now, according to local media reports, the Pueblo wanted to change some rules and objected to paying more in revenue sharing, Michael Bird. And in that previous compact, Pewaukee paid 8% of net win in taxes. Now it is 10.75%. And the other tribes had agreed to this earlier. Your sense of how this negotiation went down? There was a hard line taken by the state and the AG's office and some other folks, but the money was owed, I suppose, and folks came around. What's your sense of how this all went, however?
Well, for full disclosure, I am the only native member of the group. Full disclosure, I'd have to say I'm a member of a non-gaming tribe. We are just as poor as we were before gaming.
Right.
But to the issue, it seems to me that there's a story behind the story, and it's very easy to look at, well, Pewaukee didn't pay their fair share, I think is what most readers would walk away with. But from my perspective, what's the other part of the story? And I think the other part of the story is that how much room for negotiation was allowed, and how much time was really allowed for some negotiation. If in fact the state just arbitrarily said, well, we're going to raise it and you have no option and alternatives, then it leaves Pewaukee in a very difficult situation. And of course, the other piece of this, relative to the governor's office, that's one aspect. But now with a new administration in terms of Washington, I think that also alters and changes sort of the dynamic. The larger perspective in this nation is that most people think of gaming as Indian people getting a free ride, and they've already thought that historically. The reality is that in this country today, with some exceptions, Indian people still have some of the worst health statistics, some of the highest poverty rates, and those statistics have not changed measurably in the past 50 years. And for example, one example is the Indian Health Service is only funded at 50% of the level of need. So although people look at gaming as sort of this panacea and an answer to all Native people's problems, they don't understand, number one, the historical context and the promises that were made by the United States government to tribes in terms of meeting their needs in exchange, under treaties in exchange for land and resources. And quite frankly, we're still on the short end, in my opinion, of the stick. And this is just one sort of example of that.
Let me ask you a question. Part of the tribe's angle here with their legal defense was we're a sovereign nation. We should be able to come up with our own rules and regulations on this. Was there not a case there? I mean, that seems, given, like I said, in historical context, that would seem to be a reasonable argument that just wasn't dealt with.
Well, the argument has been made, but I think, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really speak to the specifics on that, but I think over the course of time, the legal standing of tribes have pushed the sovereignty issue and have had established had some cases ruled in their favor. But over time, many of the cases have not, in terms of, the courts have not ruled favorably and supported Native sovereignty and issues that Native populations have brought forth.
Gaming is complicated, isn't it? It's really quite something, Julianne Grimm, when you really think about, we're talking about a lot of money flowing through tribes to the state. And there was an interesting point, again, that Pewaukee's leaders made that said, look, this money could be better used for our own folks, to better our own issues, better our own education. You know what I mean? Again, is that not a reasonable argument?
Yeah, I think this conflict does really set the stage for more discussion in our wider community in New Mexico, and hopefully in the context of the whole nation. But at least we know the incoming governor is definitely not going to be the governor that we have today, although there are The election still has to play out. But I think there is a sense of these compacts not being very contemporary in the way that they view sort of the way the government has abdicated its responsibility to care for Native Americans. And you know, the sense that, you know, is the state being too greedy? Is there a way to allow the tribes to keep the money to apply it for their own needs? I think that conversation is ripe, you know, and maybe this will open that up.
That's a good point there.
You had Governor Talachi spoke at the inauguration of Santa Fe's new mayor, Alan Weber, and he said it won't always be mariachis and rainbows and unicorns. And I think that we're seeing that now.
Fair warning. Right, exactly. 2.75%, that 8% to 10.75. When you're talking these amount of millions of dollars, that's a lot of money. Do you know what I mean? And what interests me about this story is there was really not a lot of squawking in years past about the 8%, and now suddenly it has to be 10.75. You see what I mean? What happened there that the tribes just sort of lost out here? It just seemed like the negotiation was all very one-sided here when you look at it from a distance.
Yeah, I think folks need to realize, I agree with what Michael said, like there's a long history here that has to be taken into account, right? So first of all, tribes are supposed to be sovereign nations, and the fact that, in their view, that the states are sort of trying to force them to do anything, the state really doesn't have authority on tribal lands to do that. So that the way the law works is there's a federal law that requires them to negotiate with the states, and that's the only reason why they even do it. It's really the U.S. attorney who has to enforce this. The last time this really happened was John Kelly, a former U.S. attorney, tried to do this. And Pojoaque has always been, they've been feisty. They actually shut down the highway, and they have a right to do that. You know, we forget these people are supposed to be sovereign, make their own sovereign decisions. And in the case of New Mexico, you can't say this all across the country, tribes, gaming tribes here, have done two things with the money. They've invested in their people and provided the health and education that, frankly, we have not. Early childhood, Sandia provides educational opportunities for every tribal member to go anywhere they want to go educationally, which is wonderful. And they've done another really important thing politically. They've been able to build power. The reason why they are players, the gaming tribes, and I think this has spilled over to some non-gaming tribes, is they've been able to assert their rights, sadly, in a political system where money really matters. So if you look at how much money, for example, the first Native American congressional female candidate who has a good chance of being elected has received a huge chunk of tribal gaming money, and some folks don't like that. But I can tell you, Sandia Pueblo was able to assert their rights to have their own control over that mountain because they could afford lobbyists and lawyers. And so we may not be crazy about the darker side of gaming, which I'm not. I know people in our community who really struggle with gambling addiction, and that's very troubling. That's right. But to say that sovereign tribes shouldn't have the right to determine a fair deal for themselves and to take that money and do what's right with them, and that a state government should have some right to really, kind of up the rates and determine that. That's just not the deal we made with the indigenous people back when we made these treaties. And that's so Michael has a very, very, very strong point.
Yeah. You know, just a quick minute on this one, Rachel. When you think about the tribe wanting to do things, they had come to the table talking about the idea about cashing payroll checks and Social Security checks and on site. That gives a lot of folks some heartburn here, especially in a poor state. That's a difficulty. But then the other side of the argument is with the tribe saying, look, just because the rest of New Mexico is having financial problems, you can't fix it on our backs. Do you know what I mean? Again, a reasonable argument, but it didn't go anywhere. So,
really, that's a great point. The New Mexicans reporting on this really did a great job of pointing out the time frame in which all of this went down. And this was a time when the state was really having budget crunch that very well may have been a big reason why they took such a hard line on negotiations and why they upped that amount that the tribes were being required to pay into the compact. So that is the discussion, and I'm kind of surprised I don't see more of it publicly. Should this be made on our backs?
I think Julianne's point that this could open up a whole conversation here about compacts is probably apt. I think that's probably going to happen. Going to make a quick pivot now for our final thoughts this week. Earlier this hour, we heard from student organizers who are seeking change to address violence. And Rachel, I want to start with you. Your reaction to the student-led movement here in New Mexico. We know the big national movement, of course, and the kids in Parkland, Florida, and the big march in Washington. We had turnouts in Rio Rancho, Albuquerque certainly, Santa Fe certainly. It was a good turnout here. It's a big issue for us, of course. Aztec being what it is, we had our own situation here with school shootings. So your sense of the march?
You know, it's really interesting. You've heard a lot of people say nationally, and I kind of believed it too personally, that sentiment that if the Sandy Hook shooting didn't bring change in gun laws, probably no shooting will.
That's right.
But then you see these young people creating this groundswell of push for more gun legislation, and then you see people from other generations joining them.
That's right.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
These are people who, a lot of the people leading these marches can't even vote. So you're kind of like, what power do they have? But they're going to be able to vote, and they're getting people to go along with them who can. So, you know, this movement might have a long arc.
Absolutely. Eric, your sense of the local version?
Yeah, I was there at the march.
The
march was powerful, and I got to say two things that I think are disheartening. And one is that neither of our two Democratic United States senators have signed on to the assault weapons ban that Senator Feinstein is leading. Neither of them voted for it in 2013. So I think this is more than this is a nonpartisan issue. So if you feel strongly about this, I really hope that we can, at the very least, move our own elected officials to do the right thing. The second thing, I was standing next to a legislator who shall remain nameless at the march, and I asked him, why don't you guys call, like a lot of states, why don't you call the legislature into special session? In this case, it'd be extraordinary session. It would take 3/5, 60%. We have the votes, the Democrats have the votes to do that in the Senate, not in the House. But regardless of that, just to send the message. And he said, quite frankly, like the Democrats, even with the majority, don't have the votes to do that. Which, again, this is just a wake-up call for all of us. This is not a partisan issue.
Right.
If you're serious about this, we've got to hold people in our own party, I'm a Democrat, and people in other parties responsible for this, because this is, as much as it wants to be played out as this sort of partisan issue, our biggest problem in the New Mexico legislature is we can't get enough Democrats to do anything significant, and we haven't been able to do it. So it's time for them to step up and listen to these kids.
That's right, exactly right. Michael, your sense of the marches, and you know, kids have changed our country before with marches. People, you know, civil rights. There was a huge march that, you know, for high school age kids, a lot of folks sort of washed over time, don't realize that. And in Vietnam, kids, yeah, absolutely. You know, what do you think is the chances of kids changing moving the needle here in the United States with this latest effort?
Well, I think what is happening with the youth is they're calling out adults. And it needs to happen. What is the morally appropriate and correct response to all of this death that we've experienced? Is it to sit on our hands on the sidelines, or is it to act? They are calling for action. It may be a long time in coming, but they're correct, and what they're doing is very moral. And I wonder where the moral leadership is in this nation.
That's right. Who leads and who follows? We got about 20 seconds, sorry, Julianne. But Santa Fe had its own version, certainly.
We did, and we also had a lot of the local high schools participating in the previous effort, which was a walkout during the school day on March 14th. I think the one thing that hasn't been mentioned is worth mentioning that, you know, there's an effort to marginalize the voices of these teens, you know, by really shopping around the idea that they're controlled by some lefty conspiracy. And I feel like that's really hurting the possibility of, you know, moral conversations and really moving the needle and figuring out where the political will is to take some crack at this terrible problem.
Good point there. Thank you all. Good stuff on a Friday night. See you next time.